Father, we do indeed thank you for those who have very selflessly followed the call to sacrifice themselves and put themselves in harm's way for our good. And Lord, it reminds us of the fact that even to this day, it's hard to imagine in the general public today people thinking about there being a cause that's worth dying for. And that also leads us to remember the fact that you came in the flesh and died for us because it was that important for our well-being that you do so. So we thank you for those who, in like manner, in a much smaller way, but in a total way, give their lives. We just pray you'd continue to protect those who are in harm's way. And Lord, we thank you for what they do on our behalf. So thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, what we're going to do, we're starting John, the Gospel of John today. This is like walking into a candy store. I just got to tell you, I love the Gospels. In fact, let me tell you this. If you say to yourself, I don't have a lot of time to read, let alone read the Bible. And I get that, Facebook's important. But if you don't have a lot of time, I would highly recommend that at least in some regular fashion, you read one of the Gospels. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. They're very simple. And if you're trying to decide which one to do John. And so that's what we're going to do is John. And that's why, sort of as a policy, a teaching policy, I want to make sure that we get our noses into one of the Gospels every single year. Every single year. And we usually do it in the summertime. And we've rotated around. Since I've been here, I think we've done all the Gospels twice already. So we're back to John. And you'd think, well, you get tired of John, right? It's got stuff you've read before. It's like reading a textbook over and over again. Well, no, it's not. It's really remarkably different. There's new things that pop out. The Holy Spirit does things. So we're back in John, and we're back in the beginning of John. And as our tradition in the past as well, what we're going to do is I'm going to read out loud for you the entire chapter. We're going to do one chapter a week through the summer of John. Go from chapter 1 through chapter 11 through the summer. Then we're going to take a break and do something different in the fall. And then in January of 2013, if the Lord allows or he doesn't come back, middle of December, then in January, we'll pick up where we left off in John, and it's timed in such a way that as we move through John from January, when we get up to Easter, we'll be at the Easter thing in John when we get there. So I'm just excited. I got goosebumps. Can you tell? I have goosebumps. So what I want to do for you, I'm going to read for you the entire first chapter of John. That's what we're going to do this week. Next week will be chapter 2, and then the week after that will be chapter... See, you're good. So that's very easy. And I would encourage you to not read with me. Just listen. Because when the Gospels were first written, they were written to be read out loud to the small churches that they were distributed to. We have rock-solid evidence that all 4 Gospels had been copied and bundled together as a set and were in circulation as early as 100 A.D. That's 70 years after Jesus died. And I make the point that we are sitting here 70 years after Pearl Harbor. So you just can't change the facts that quickly. So these were in circulation, as we know from fact. So they circulated through the places, the copies went around, people listened because they were not largely literate, and they listened to what were in these words. So these are meant to be read aloud. I have the New American Standard Version, so yours might be different, so you'll be struggling with trying to figure out what the words are. Just listen for a second, and we'll hit all of chapter 1, okay? And then we'll come back and we'll study just a portion of this in chapter 1. So here's John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness didn't comprehend it. And there came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. But he was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. But there was the true light, which, coming into the world, enlightens every man. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. And John testified about him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me.' For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God at any time, but the only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him." So this is the testimony of John. When the Jews sent to him priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" And he confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." So they asked him, "Well, what then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "Nope." And then they said to him, "Well, who are you, so that we may give an answer to those who sent us? Who do you say, what do you say about yourself?" So he said, "I am a voice of one crying in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as Isaiah the prophet said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees, and they asked him and said to him, "Well, why then are you baptizing? I mean, if you're not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet." And John answered him, saying, "I baptize in water, but among you stands one whom you do not know. It is he who comes after me, the thong of whose sandal I'm not worthy to untie." Now these things took place in Bethany beyond the Jordan where John was baptizing. The next day he saw Jesus coming to him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is he on behalf of whom I said, 'After me comes a man who has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me.' I did not recognize him, but so that he might be manifested to Israel, I came baptizing in water." John testified, saying, "I've seen the Spirit descending as a dove out of heaven, and he remained upon him. I did not recognize him, but he who sent me to baptize in water said to me, 'He upon whom you see the Spirit descending and remaining upon him, this is the one who baptizes in the Holy Spirit.' Well, I myself have seen and have testified that this is the Son of God." Again, the next day, John was standing with two of his disciples, and he looked at Jesus as he walked and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. And Jesus turned and saw them following and said to them, "What do you seek?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" And he said to them, "Come and you will see." And so they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him one day, for it was about the 10th hour. And then one of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. So he found first his own brother, Simon, and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which translated means Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which translated means Peter. The next day, Jesus purposed to go into Galilee, and he found Philip, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Well, Philip said to him, "Well, come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said to him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." And Nathanael said to him, How do you know me?" And Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." And Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you that I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? Oh, you'll see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." That's chapter 1. Let's take a look more closely at a part of it that is probably in the top 5 most famous passages in the entire Bible. It's the very opening phrases of John's gospel. We read it already. But every week we're going to look at this quote right here that comes from John's gospel. Because John tells us at the end of his book why he writes it. Is it for general educational purposes? No. Very good answer. These things have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And at that point I say, so what? And he says, so what? Here's the so what. And that believing you may have life in his name. So the entire purpose of John's gospel is to understand who Jesus is, and in embracing yourself, who he is, finding real life. It's not just a story. It's a way in which to find life in his name. So let's go back to the beginning. And what I did, let's talk about where you start. So if you compare John to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, let's see how they differ and how they start. Because, if you're going to write a story about the biography of Jesus, where is the beginning? Where do you start, right? By the way, I grouped those top 3 together as apart from John because they're what we call the synoptic gospels. They have one eye. I was going to put a cyclops up there, but I thought that might distract you, so we're not going to do that. Synoptic, syn means kind of one, and optic means optic. So the first 3 gospels have such a similar viewpoint, and John is different. It's not that the first 3 gospels are not identical. If you've read the gospels, they're not identical, but they have kind of the similar viewpoint. It's like if someone were to go into court and testify about seeing a car wreck at the intersection, of Forest and Main. If you had 3 people standing on one corner and they came in and they gave a testimony of what they saw, they'd say pretty much the same thing, but they'd say it with different words, but it's pretty much the same thing. But if you had someone on the opposite corner who watched it, they may bring in a totally different viewpoint. That's what the 3 Gospels and John are like. 3 people standing on one corner, one person standing on the other corner, talking about the same event in the center of the intersection, but using their own words. So let's see how Matthew, Mark, and Luke start, and then you'll see how crazy it is how John starts. So Matthew starts like this. He starts off with 1:1. This is the record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So he starts off talking about where Jesus came from, his genealogy, who's he related to. Now, why do you do that? Well, to prove that he's got the right credentials of a sort. Because we know from the Old Testament, the Messiah has to have certain genealogical credentials. And so Matthew's going to show that. He's going to show that. How about Mark? Where does Mark start? Well, Mark starts with the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He quotes from Isaiah's prophecy about John the Baptist, and then verse 4, and John the Baptist appeared in the wilderness. And then he starts talking about John the Baptist. Well, he doesn't start about talking the beginning of the life of Jesus. He talks about the life of this one John the Baptist, who was the one, like John the Baptist said in the passage today, was sent by God to make a way for the Messiah. So Mark decides, let's start with John the Baptist. That makes a lot of sense because he's the beginning of the story about Jesus in a real sense because he comes telling about him. Where does Luke start? Well, Luke starts here, and I skipped to verse 13. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zacharias. This is the father of John the Baptist. For your petition has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you'll give him a name, John. So Luke also starts with the story of John the Baptist. He winds it back one more notch and talks about the parents of John the Baptist. So we're starting with John the Baptist, laying this foundation about who is to come. John the Baptist talks about this Messiah. So that's where they start. So where does John start? In the beginning was the Word. What is that? Does that not strike anyone odd? And you're going to write a biography. You're going to write about this man, Jesus. And it seems like what John does, he doesn't go back to John the Baptist or even to the genealogy of Jesus. He goes back to the beginning of the universe. Now, why would you do that for a human like Jesus? Why would you go back to the beginning of the universe? Exactly. Maybe there's something much more than human about Jesus. I mean, he's human, for sure. But maybe there's something of cosmic dimensions. We're going to go back to the creation of the universe. Right. So a Jew would read this verse. And you know what they would think automatically? That sounds familiar, right? That sounds like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So clearly what John's doing is he's saying, he's cluing us in before we even see the birth of Jesus, that Jesus somehow is connected to the beginning of the universe. And right there, if you're a skeptic about who Jesus is, you take a couple steps back and say, where's this going, right? Where is this going? This is just nuts. Well, why does John use this phrase, in the beginning was the Word? See that right there? Now, I think that's a very strange thing until you think about it for a while. Why is he the Word? Why can't you say, in the beginning was the almighty, powerful Messiah? That would make more sense to me. But John's trying to clue us in about something here. And when you see the word word, you gotta completely abandon all your modern thinking of word. Word for us is just a little component of speech, right? I just said a sentence that had a handful of words in it, and you understood some of them because I was talking too fast. But it's just a component of speech. Something more going on here. In fact, it's more like that we retain it a little bit when you make a promise to somebody, and they look at you in the eyes and say, "Are you really going to do that?" And you say, "You have my word." Now, what is that? That's not a component of speech. That's a promise of an intention of the will, that this will happen. So there's something like that. In fact, if we use this connection back with Genesis 1, look what is in Genesis 1. Do you remember this phrase? Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. His word creates. It's powerful. It's not just a piece of a sentence. And he does this over and over. You know this. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Another way, right past that, verse 6, God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters," and it happened. And then after that, he goes on and on, verse 9, and God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered in one place, let the dry land appear," and it was so. God said, God said, God said, God said. Now, God also says something in this creation process. He says, and what he says turns into reality. And he also says, "This is good." And he names them as well. So it's his word that's making these things happen and go down. God is the only one in the universe who can speak, and it happens. So when you're thinking about the word, that's God in this creative process, a Jew would go back to Genesis 1 and say, so in the beginning was the Word. Well, I get that because God used words to create the universe. He's the only commander-in-chief who can speak and reality comes into existence. He's the only one that can do that. I understand the word thing because God used words to build the universe. So you're going to tell me this Jewish thing, you're going to tell me that in some way, John, you're telling me that this Jesus of Nazareth, who was the son of this carpenter guy, he was somehow that word that created in Genesis 1:1, those words that we hear God using, the fundamental building bricks of the universe is God's word, and you're going to tell me that's this Jesus guy? Because that's clearly what John's implying. Clearly implying. That's what this is. In the beginning was the Word. Well, he goes on from here. The Word is actually, in a general sense, the expressed will or command or the rule, or he names it, which means he owns it. It's the executive action. It's the expression of the invisible God. And I like the word express or expression. What's that? The promise, yeah. And so when he speaks, is that going to happen? Have my word on it. There's not even a delay between his word and the thing happening. That's how immediate it is. So think of those words up there. That's what the word is. It's not a piece of speech. It's the expression of the unknown God who has a will and an intent to accomplish something. I like the word executive too, although we use it for companies and stuff, and that's not really great. But an executive is someone who accomplishes, who gets it done. Because in Genesis 1, God's word gets it done. Okay? And it's more than just a representation of the will of the one speaking it. The idea extends back into the actual will itself. This isn't just the expression of the will. This is actually the will made known. So that's what this word means. It's a really big thing. Really, really big thing. Isaiah 55 reflects it really well. So will my word be. This is God speaking. So will my word be which goes forth from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, without accomplishing what I desire, and without succeeding in the matter for which I sent it. There it is. God speaks, boom, and it happens. And Jesus is this word. Yeah. So John's trying to mess with our heads here so we understand that Jesus is much, much more than a man. We're not going to do a simple biography about a man who was born and lived and died. Something that transcends all of creation about who this guy is. He is the expressed embodiment of the will of God that started from the creation itself. No way! Psh, watch this, okay? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Actually, from a Jewish perspective, that makes sense, because in the creation process, there's God, and he's creating, and his words are there with him, and they're doing things. So it's like the expression of who he is, and his will is right there, his words and him. It's like it's with him. It's with him. His words are with him. And then he blows our mind and says, but the Word was God. Oh! And that's how you get the idea that this expressed will of God is what this is, not just the representation of it. It is who he is. It's his will made manifest and going to execute his plans. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I can't tell you how many biblical skeptics have tripped on this first line of John's gospel. And how many biblical supporters go back to it over and over again and say, can you believe what he's saying? Look at this. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and this Word created the universe. Yeah, we're not going small on this. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him. And apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. So, what exists that the Word did not create? Zero. Everything. Anything that is a created thing came from him. Everything. Now we're shooting big. Can you imagine someone starting into this biography about this Jesus of Nazareth from this son of this carpenter, and John is saying, you're not going to believe this, but everything that exists, he made. Oh, come on. I saw him make a table last week, but I don't think he made everything, right? Yeah, Larry? Yeah, God saw that it was good. And God is the only one who's good. Yeah, I mean, you can't understand John's assertions here unless you read Genesis 1. Because that's what John's deliberately trying to push your face into. That the unnamed presence in Genesis 1 is Jesus. What? Yeah. So anyway, he uses in verse 3 what's typically done in ancient thinking is to state a very powerful thing twice in opposites. Everything was created through him. Nothing exists that wasn't created through him. That's a way of saying yeah and oh yeah. Okay, that's how he's doing that. So he's the creator. In him was life. Well, now that makes sense too, because in the creation there was not life at the beginning, and then there was life. So if this creator is in this process, you could say, yeah, okay, and life was in him. That makes sense. John's going to extend it. And this life was the light of men, meaning that they were in darkness before the life came from this one. That's what he's saying. Have you ever been in a really super dark room and you're feeling around for the light switch? And then you turn the light switch, and as you turn the light switch, the darkness resists the light until the light finally overcomes. No, that's not what happens. What happens is the light goes, pow, darkness is gone. Darkness can't resist light. But what he's saying right here is that something about the Word, it brings life. Right, we get that from creation. But this life was a light that pushed away the darkness for man. Wow. The ancient culture understood darkness better than we do because we have electricity. We don't really understand darkness until you go camping. And then you understand darkness, right? That's right. This life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness. But the darkness does not comprehend it, which sort of makes sense. I mean, if you live in darkness your entire life and you're used to darkness, if you're one of those little white salamanders that live in the caves down underground in a little piece of water, and you're all white and your eyes don't work because there's no light, as soon as you turn on the light, the salamanders go, wah! What is that? Well, that's what John's saying is what happened here. This word is life, okay? And this life shone. It kind of dispelled the darkness. And as soon as it shone into the darkness of where men are, they all went, what is that? They didn't understand it. Didn't understand it at all. Great metaphor John's using for what he watched in life. Then he goes back to John the Baptist. Well, there came a man sent from God whose name was John. Love this picture. That's John up there doing his thing. He came as a witness. He came to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. The interesting thing is that God understood that when Jesus as the light came into the world, people would go, ah! So what they needed was someone to turn up the light slowly. That's how I do it, just so you don't burn out your eyeballs. You turn up the light slowly. John was a way of being able to turn up the light kind of slowly and say, listen, you got to understand. The light's coming up, and it's going to blind you in a second, and I need to tell you about this light that's coming. That was John's 100% purpose. He was made to kind of get everybody ready for the Messiah. That's why back in Isaiah, when it talks about John's purpose, he's the one who prepares the way for the Lord. Heard that in the Messiah? He's the one that makes the pathways of our Lord flat. I mean, he takes the mountainous trails and he brings them level. He takes the lower parts and he makes them flat. The mountains and the valleys made low. So he actually prepares the way for the Messiah, not for the Messiah to have an easier time, but so that we can comprehend who he is. And that's what John was doing. That's what it says right here. He did it so that they might believe through him. And John many times, as we read this morning, said, I'm not the guy. I'm just here to prepare you for the guy. Let me turn up the light. And when you see him, you'll understand who I'm talking about. So that's what he did. John came to get our eyes used to the light. He, John, was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. And he turned up the darkness in the room ever so slowly. Well, there was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. Now, he uses an interesting phrase here. This light didn't just get born. It came into the world, implying that it came from out of the world. Get that? I love using English. Yeah, Jesus came from outside of this creation somehow and then came into it. What? Well, it makes sense in a way because everything was created through him and by him, and nothing exists that didn't come through him. So clearly, if he made everything here, then he started from outside of it, right? Yeah, this is how you do it. He came in the world and enlightens every man. Every man can understand that. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world didn't know him. And there's amazement in John's voice as he says that. Here's this guy through whom everything was made, who then decides to enter into the thing that he made. And you would think that the creator of the whole place, people would say, oh, we know you. You made all of us. We recognize you through all the whole creation. We know you. But clearly John says he created everything and he came into it. And even though everything was made through him, it didn't know him. Now this is not really unusual because even to this very day, when we talk about who Jesus is, the existence of God, you have the creation evolution debate. We talk about how you see God's thumbprint of creation and everything that goes on. There's so many people that look at that and say, I don't see him. He's not there. I don't think so. And that's exactly what goes on to this very day. The world didn't know him. The world doesn't even recognize him. And we could go on for hours talking about that, but that's part of the thing. That's the irony that John talks about. As he gets us ready to understand the life of Jesus. The irony is the guy who touched you to make you, you don't recognize. Go figure. He came to his own being the Jews. The Messiah was promised through Jewish revelation. He was meant to be the king of the Jews and to extend that to be our king as well. He came to his own, and of course, his own, the Jews, they know the Old Testament. They know everything in the Old Testament. They know the promises about the Messiah and what it would take to recognize the Messiah when he comes. They know all that stuff so well, they teach it every week. They write it on the doorposts of their house. They attach it to their... They know the Messiah. They ought to recognize him, right? They missed it too. He came to his own, and those who were his own didn't receive him. Now see, that blows John's mind more than almost anything else. This is a nation of people who were who were created and established by God to be a testimony about who God is and his loving kindness, his desire to live amongst us, and the promise of a Messiah that would make it possible for us to be in that community with God's Son. These are the people who are the most primed in the entire universe. They missed him. They missed him. Later on, you'll find out that when the Romans come in 70 AD as the result of the first Jewish wars, first Jewish wars, they wrecked Jerusalem. And it's very clear, the way it's stated, that's because they rejected Jesus. They missed him altogether. And they should have known. They should have known. But, and here's the good news from that bad news, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. So that his own, the Jews, may have missed who he was. But those who said, I know who he is, who received him, it says right there, received him and believed, he gives the right. Now that word gives the right is actually a legal phrase. It's a legal phrase. It basically means you can legally say, I would like to be part of the family. And he says, you're legally allowed, come on in. And you're in. It's a legal phrase saying you're allowed. What did it take for them to be allowed to join this family? Receive, believe. And what? Receive and believe who he is. Remember, that's John's intent of the entire gospel. Who is Jesus? And so he says, even though the Jews, who were the most prepared people in the universe to understand and recognize the Messiah, missed him, nevertheless, those who were not part of his people, who said, but I accept and I believe who you are, says, okay, you got it. Two people in the New Testament that Jesus says they have great faith. I love these two people. I could talk about these people all day, but we don't have time. Two people. Did you know that they're both non-Jews? And in both cases, when they demonstrate their understanding of who Jesus is, Jesus looks around in the crowd and says, I haven't seen such faith like this in all of Israel. Right? That was deliberately meant to be a slap for those who should have recognized him and didn't. You remember who the two people are, by the way? Roman centurion was one of them. No, the Syrophoenician woman. I know that's a mouthful. She lived up on the coast, the present-day Lebanese coast. And, yeah. They understood who Jesus was. Jesus says, they get it. Why don't you, in all of Israel, have never seen such faith? So it's really the identity of Jesus that's central to this entire thing. And those who accept who he was have the right to become children of God. Now, I need to make a point because of the region that we live in the world and the predominant religion here. If, through understanding who Jesus is, you can become a child of God, what does that make you before that? Not a child of God. Is this kind of advanced math for us here? There is a proposed idea that we are all children of God, that we all start as children of God. Well, in a sense, in a small sense, since he's our creator, that's kind of true. But in terms of being accepted into his family as child of God, we're all children of God? No. In fact, the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 2, we started out as, get ready for this, children of wrath. Not very friendly. So the biblical idea all the way through is that we don't have a privileged position in God's family already when we're born. We're way outside it. Way outside it. And if you want to enjoy the life that God offers, you're going to have to somehow be adopted into his family. And so Paul, when he talks about that, when he says we're part of God's family, he doesn't say we were born into it. He says we are adopted into it. Because before you're adopted into the family, you are outside the family. Get it? Is this cool? So you just got to understand, that's the baseline we're talking about. Who were born, this is cool, not of blood, nor the will of flesh, nor of the will of man. That is, it doesn't matter whose family or whose genealogy you fit into. I'm a proud member of the tribe of Ephraim. Who cares? That's what he's saying right here. It doesn't matter if you're born of the right blood or the right flesh or even of the will of anybody. It has nothing to do with that. But you do have to be born to enter a family. It has nothing to be born about in some kind of human sense, but of God. You're born of God. And here John is starting to give us the idea that Jesus will say to Nicodemus in chapter 3, Nicodemus, you have to be born again. Oh, what does that mean? How can I crawl back into my mom? That's what Nicodemus says. As he says, what are you kidding? No, you have to be born of God. It's a different birthing process. You got to be born again. So this is the beginning. He starts to clue us in about this. Is right here. Who become children of God, how? By believing in his name and receiving him. So you have to believe who he is, but you got to more than just believe who he is. Then you have to actually accept him and receive him. It's a twofold process. Even later in the New Testament, they'll tell us, even the demons know who Jesus is. It's not a matter of them being misinformed about who Jesus is, and so they're going to hell. They know who Jesus is. They don't receive him. They're totally opposed to him. So there really is a sense in which you got to understand who Jesus is, and John already told us that's why I'm writing this book. But then, as an act of the will, you got to say, and I want him, I receive him. Somehow I trust him. So that's going to be his thrust as he goes along. So he wraps this up. The Word became flesh, a human being, and he dwelt among us. So if you're thinking at this point, who is this Word dude? He hasn't said Jesus yet. Have you noticed that? Who is this Word? Well, he's going to be very specific. This Word, which created the universe, now is going to take human form, became flesh, become a human. The one who's outside of creation and created it is going to actually become one of the created in a sense. Whoa. And he's going to come into it. The Word became flesh. Now remember the beginning, verse 1, we said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. Now, use your Greek logic. If the Word was God, and the Word became flesh, then Jesus, who's in the flesh, is God. Isn't that cool? This is why so many people wreck the ships of their criticism of the Bible or who Jesus is, because when you get to this, it's kind of unequivocal what he's saying right here. This is why Jesus is called Emmanuel, which means God with us. I mean, it's really pretty tight, is what we're talking about. So the Word became flesh. This very Word that's responsible for the creation of everything you will ever touch and see in your entire life, limited himself in the form of a man. Extraordinary. This word dwelt right here. I love this. I just had to take a little detour right here. Yeah, you know what this word means? Since we're Memorial Day weekend, most people on Memorial Day weekend, they go camping. It's a tent. So it really means that the Word became flesh and he tented with us. The flesh, in a sense, is a way of talking about a temporary dwelling place. A tent is a temporary dwelling place. And as a temporary dwelling place, it tends to decay. My canvas tent gets holes in it, and stuff like that. But it holds us okay for a while. Here's what he's saying. Even though that we are tenting in our experience, we're in these temporary dwellings that seem to be getting wrecked by the weather all the time, more than others, God elected to come and tent with us. Isn't that cool? God elected to come and tent with us in these little campgrounds where the rain leaks in the roof and life isn't perfect and you got to stumble through the dark at night to go to the potty. God decided he's going to come tent with us. And the amazing thing, I referenced that passage in Revelation. At the end of the story, when we're with God, and this all wraps up, he's still tenting with us. It's exactly the word that's used in Revelation. By the way, the word tabernacle is a fancy word for tent. That's all it means. Tabernacle means tent. Tabernacle, I'll say this 2 times. Tabernacle means tent. Tent, tabernacle, okay? So, in fact, I think if you have a King James version, this may say he tabernacled with us. And your head's going, well, what does that mean? It's a tent, okay? It's just a tent. It's a temporary dwelling place. So God elected to come, Jesus, this word, come in the flesh and actually tent with us in this leaky place that we call the world. And we saw his glory. That's the light again. Glory is just the radiant outpouring broadcast of who he is. We saw his glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father. Now, I got to ask you, how many people this week use the phrase only begotten? Did you? Okay, that's cool. Well, we don't know what it means in English, but in the Greek we do. It's very, very simple. Anytime you had an only son, he was called this. Monogenes is what it is in Greek. He's a monogenes. Mono means, come on, mono, one. Genesis is where we get the word Genesis or genetics. It's to be birthed, basically. It's the beginning. So whenever you had an only child, you called them your monogenes. And so here is the person who is the only. But the child issue is not a great translation. It really means from the Father, this person is the one-of-a-kind only one. The only one-of-a-kind, only one. Only one. Only just one. He's the one. He's only one. It's a way of very firmly saying that there is no one like Jesus. There is no one. He's the only one. He's the only one. So glory as of the only one of a kind from the Father. There is not going to be any other like him. Full of grace, full of truth.
I have a curious question.
Yeah, curious question.
Maybe off topic, but how do the LDS confuse begotten with only one who received the body?
Oh, that's a big question.
How do they confuse those two?
I was thinking the same thing.
Because they think of it as being only son. How they get only body, we can talk about that later. It really is kind of tough. But in this particular case, he's really only saying Jesus is a one-of-a-kind guy from God. That's all they're really saying. One of a kind. There are no others. I want to show you this grace and truth. Grace, by the way, is a religious word, and so our eyes glaze over and we go, yes, I believe in grace, and you don't really know what that means. Every time you see the word grace, just think of gift. It's the easy way to do it. It's something that's given to you that you don't merit and you can't earn, and the giver would be offended if you tried to earn it. That's grace. Truth means truth. Truth means, the better way I like to translate it is reality. There is really only one reality. We could sit around and debate about reality all day long, but in the end, the person with the strongest opinion does not win in terms of defining reality. There's only one reality. I come out of a scientific background, electromagnetics. I know, it's kind of crazy, but I studied how you send radio waves across space. Can you see radio waves? No. So there was a lot of debate for a long time as science evolved about how exactly does this thing work that's invisible in the radio waves, and how can you transmit, Morse code across the Atlantic? How does that work? What's it touching? What's it move? So there's a huge debate because you couldn't see with your own eyes what was going on. It takes a long time. There were opinions about, well, there's this thing called the ether, and the radio waves go through the ether, which we know is stupidly wrong, and all the stuff is going on. But these guys, that's where you get Ethernet. Exactly, that's where you get Ethernet, turns out. But they debated about this for a long time, and then finally, it wasn't the guys who had the best opinions about reality that said this is reality. There's really only one reality. And so what John's saying, if you want to know the way things really are, especially in the realm that you can't see, if you want to know what the real reality is, check out Jesus. He came understanding the giftedness of God, his gift to us, and he came telling us the way it really is. The way it really is. There's still an awful lot of debate as men debate about how things really are. And, it's caused this era that just frustrates the tar out of me now, where there's this plurality of understanding about the way things are. And at the end of the debate about what reality is, many times the debate ends with someone saying, well, that's your reality. I have my reality. If that works for you, fine. Mine works for me. Well, no. There's only one reality. And lots of debate about who it is. You want to understand the way things truly are, especially in an invisible sense? Go to the guy who is outside of this place. And he may be able to give you the best information. Because as created beings, we can't see the forest for the trees. Right? That's the issue. Maybe this one who came from outside has a better perspective on the way things truly are, especially a better perspective on why we're here, what we're made of really, the invisible part of us that we can't see, and who you are. Maybe he can tell us the right way to think about these things. And not because he's just a great philosopher, but because he comes from outside of it and he sees it. He's the only objective viewer of creation because he came from outside it. He created. He knows it. So that's what John's saying in those little two words right there. Those little two words. It goes back to John. John testified about him and cried out saying, this was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me. You got to understand, just as an aside, When John was doing his thing, John the Baptist was doing his thing, he was very popular. He was very popular. He was the freak show in the desert, man. There were people that would come out from Jerusalem, come down to the Jordan River Valley, and say, what are you doing today? Nothing. Let's go watch the freak in the desert. And then a lot of people would come out. And he was very popular. Even the Pharisees came down to check him out. It was a sideshow of sideshows. But there was something very important going on as well. I mean, John was bigger than life. I mean, he didn't wear three-piece suits. He wore camel's hair and stuff like that. And he ate grasshoppers. But that was not really the sideshow. The sideshow was the fact that he was talking about something about the kingdom of God being near and you need to repent. And they were baptized. It was crazy stuff. John was a big celebrity at this time. And what John, not John the Baptist, but John who wrote this book is saying, John the Baptist was a big celebrity. But you got to understand, there's a much bigger celebrity coming. That's what this phrase is all about. A higher rank than me. He existed before me. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. He's saying we saw it all. We drank it up, and we saw all of who this Jesus was. Gift upon gift from this Jesus is what he's saying. For the law was given through Moses. Okay, hold on with this picture. I'll explain in a second. The law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus the Messiah. Okay, why these pictures? The law is a measure of righteousness. It tells you what righteousness is, right? But he's saying that when Jesus came, he was righteousness. See it? You could take the measuring tape of the law and you could put it on him and say, righteousness, righteousness, righteousness. Even Jesus challenges his accusers at the end of his life. Point out any sins. I'm open. Anyone? Sins? Could anyone in this room do that? I can't. Go ahead. Point out a sin. Okay, I've got a half a dozen. It's easy. Yeah, and Dorothy's got 2 dozen. But he's saying this one, the law was given through Moses, and that's a big deal for a Jew reading this. That's a big deal because it's a statement from God's perspective about what righteousness will look like in the flesh. That's righteousness. That's goodness. That's goodliness in that sense. But Jesus, he was it. And what is this righteousness? Grace, the gift of God. God's intention, despite all odds, to see benefit come to you, that blessing of grace, and the truth, the way things really are. And he wore it good. So you have the measuring tape from the tailor, and you have the good-looking suit. That's the difference between the law and Jesus. Is that kind of a weird metaphor? Yeah, okay. Don't think that I came to abolish the law, Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, or the prophets. I didn't come to abolish it, but to wear it, to fulfill it. That's what he's saying. I'm it in the flesh. Okay, he closes out. No one has seen God at any time. By the way, you know why you can't see him? Because he's invisible. Yeah. There's one benediction in the end of one of the books in the New Testament. Now unto the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God, be honor and glory forever and ever. So no one's seen God. Why? Because you can't see him. He's invisible. No one has seen God at any time, but the only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father. He has explained him. Now here, for a Jew who does not believe in who Jesus is, this is almost blasphemy. Okay, so listen to this really carefully. No one has seen God at any time. Everyone agrees with that. Because, if you see God, you die. That's what he's talking about. But the only begotten God. Now, your version may say the only begotten of God, or the only begotten with God, or something like that. The Greek says the only begotten God. This has caused a lot of people to get freaked out, too. You mean the one of a kind? The one of a kind, only one of a kind, the only one of is God? Yes. So he's just saying it straight out to us. And what he's saying is that this only one who came in our presence, he's the one who came from the bosom of the Father. Now, I don't use the word bosom much either, because people slap you when you do. But bosom, the bosom of God, is the deepest. Think of the heart of God, the deepest, You can't get any closer to someone than when you're kind of wrapped in their bosom in that sense. And that's the image he's trying to say, is that no one can see God, but this one and only one of only one, the only one guy, he came from the deepest, intimate core of the heart of who God is. He knows God because he comes from that core. the bosom of the Father, he's explained him. And that word explain doesn't mean explain. It's a much better word, but I don't know what it is in English. In fact, it's the same word we use when we talk about teaching the Bible exegetically. We exegete. We draw out and fully make known what the Bible says. He's saying that Jesus is the one who comes from this intimate place of the heart of the Father, and he has been drawn out and fully makes known. He exegetes who God is from the very core of the heart of God. Holy smokes. So this Jesus isn't just a good philosopher. He has origins in this sense that come from the very heart core of who God is, and he has come to draw that out and make it known to all of us, to exegete it. Explains just too weak a word. You see that? Yeah. So he has come that we might know the heart of God, because he came from there. This is blasphemy to a Jew, unless Jesus is who he says he is. Well, let's wrap this up. Here's the Gospel of John, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but a funny thing happened. We thought we were going to read the beginning of the Gospel of John, and we did. We read chapter 1, verse 1 through 17, 18, something like that. And you would think you would get the beginning of the life of Jesus, but what we actually got from John is his end conclusion. About what? About who Jesus is. Now, this is backwards. You write a book, you make a case for who he is, and at the end you say, so in conclusion, Jesus is the Word, he's the one who comes from God, and you draw your conclusions based on the book. That's how you write a book, right? But John decides to go, no way, and he flips them. So at the beginning of the book, he says, listen, I've lived with this guy for 3 years, and I'm going to tell you who he is based on what I've seen. Right off the top, I'm going to tell you who he is. It's kind of like a teaser in a way, because if I would read this stuff, I would roll my eyes and go, "What? You got to be kidding me! These are the biggest claims for a human being I've ever seen in my life. What do you mean comes from the bosom of the Father? Are you kidding me? I mean, everything that's created, even the concrete I'm standing on, was made by him. Well, are you kidding me? Well, then what you need to do is prove it. Here's John's conclusions. I'm just going to do really quick what we've already seen. Jesus is the expression of God's nature. That's his word. He was with God and he was God. He created everything. Life itself is who he is, and he shined into the darkness where there was no life, and the dark ones couldn't figure out who he was. Oh, turn off the light. Creation didn't even know who its creator was, which is crazy. But further than that, even his own, the Jews who were well prepared, should have known him, and they did not know who he was. They rejected him. But those who received and those who believed, they were adopted by him. He became human and tented among us. He was the one-of-a-kind proclamation of God, drawing out and explaining who he was. He was grace and truth in the flesh. And he's the full expression of the heart of the unseeable God. Now, come on. Tell me if that's not one of the most bizarre and big lists you've ever seen made about anyone in your life. He's giving us his conclusion. And this is where, for an astute reader who's not really up to speed on who this Jesus is, you read this and go, how? No, I don't think so. It's kind of this, like, this right here. Oh yeah? Prove it. So he's making this audacious claim in the front that you'll say, you mean living with him for 3 years, you've come to this bizarre conclusion about the nature of who Jesus is? Yes. And you know how you can join me in your understanding of that? Read the rest of my book. So that's his intro to the book of John. I'm going to give you the most incredible claims of my conclusions of who Jesus is in a cosmic beginning of the universe sense. I'm going to give you those conclusions. And now, if you want to join me in that, just keep reading the book. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep reading the book and see if John is true to his claim right here. I've written these things, I put these down so that you might believe that Jesus is that Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life in his name. That's the whole purpose of the book. So if you're sitting right here saying, I think John's claims about John or about Jesus are a little over the top, yeah, it's okay, fair enough, because this is an over-the-top proclamation. Just hold on to your horses, and we'll continue reading as we go. And you tell me if you agree with what John says at the end of his book. You tell me. We won't have time to finish chapter 1 this morning. I read it for you this morning. Read it yourself. Next week is chapter 2. Astonishing things. And you see as Jesus starts to reveal who he is, people saying, I thought I knew who this guy was, but he's more than I think he is. So join us in that adventure, okay? Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this incredible book. Incredible book. And our hearts are excited to be able to march our way through these chapters and slowly soak up what we see in the revealed and the documented and recorded life of this Jesus, this Word who came in the flesh and tented among us, so that we might understand the deepest, core, intimate understanding of who you are. Lord, you've been so gracious to us. You, through your Spirit, have revealed to us who Jesus is, and through him come to understand who you are and your love for us. Lord, it's as though we echo the words of Paul when he says that the one who's shown in the darkness is the one who's shown in our hearts the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. And you've called us to yourself, and we've understood, and we've received, and we've embraced. And we've been born anew. It's even 2,000 years after the fact, it still is an astonishing dynamic of how you draw people to yourself and how we become born again in you. Thank you for your great loving kindness shown to us, the grace and the truth through Jesus. And we pray that you'd continue to enlighten our hearts and to draw us closer to you as we continue through this great book. So thanks now in Jesus' name. Amen.